Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the Identity Project. Today, I have a friend of mine that I met about 5 years ago. It's funny, it was at a CrossFit coaches prep course or level two course way back in the day, and kind of reached out to him on a whim and hopped on a podcast. And yeah, man, I appreciate you being here. What's going on, Michael? How are you?
Justin, it's a pleasure to be back here with you, man. It's been way too long. As you were giving that intro, I had this flashback all of a sudden to that coaches seminar. And I remember it was just after my back surgery, and I could barely get below parallel on an air squat at that thing. So it was a really hard time, but we've come a long way since then.
Yeah, no, man. I was kind of like a CrossFit rookie at that point. I think that was like my first or second year. And, I was working at Strong, and Gail had mentioned you, and, said that you competed in the CrossFit games and on this team with Brood. And I was like, man, who is this guy? So yeah, the more I got to meet you, it was just exciting, not only to hear those stories, but, just kind of meet you, the person. And that's what I'm excited to kind of dive in today is just to learn more about your story. With all the guests that we have on the show, I literally take them back to like elementary school days. So let's do it, man. Let's dive into it.
Excellent, man. Let's go.
So take me back. How old are you now?
28.
28 years old. All right. So take me back to like elementary school days. Where did you grow up? Let's just kind of dive into your story and kind of like what your childhood looked like. And then we'll kind of expand in and go into middle school, high school, and then, kind of keep evolving into where you are today.
Sounds good, man. So I grew up in a super small town just outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's called New Roads, population 5,000. There are 2 stoplights in this town. I grew up playing football, baseball, soccer, basketball. I would go on to play golf and weightlifting, etc. And throughout my whole childhood, that was really that was like the constant. I was obsessed with sports. I come from a really big, connected family. When I was born, I had 7 of my 8 great grandparents still alive, and I got to know 6 of them. So I was the oldest kid. I was the oldest grandkid on both sides. And so I got to experience a lot of my family. I grew up Catholic. I grew up in a Catholic school. What else? When I was about 9, I started experimenting with alcohol. And I think I've finally I finally figured out exactly what happened that changed me when I was around 9. And I think it was an experience that I had at a high school football game. But every game behind the stands, the younger kids would play football behind the stands while the high schoolers were playing the actual game. And one day, I remember my cousin getting beat up by some kids his age that were kind of the bad kids in the school. And before that day, I had always looked up to the jocks. Like they were my idols. I wanted to be just like them. And that day, things changed. I remember him getting beat up, and I was much smaller than him, so I didn't stick up for him or anything like that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I can never be him. I can never be like my cousin. And it was sometime around then. That's why I'm attributing that experience to this shift in my my mindset. But it was around then that I went from looking up to the jocks to looking up to the bad kids. And I think it went something like, I never want to get picked on. I never want to get beat up. And so I have to get in with those guys. Like I have to be one of them. And so I started looking up to them, and I started to do things that were not authentic to who I was, just to fit in with the bad kids. And so on my 9th birthday, that looked like some other older cousins asking me if I wanted to take some shots of whiskey. And I said yes, even though it made me really uncomfortable. And I had never had such a thought in my life. I'm 9, for Christ's sake. But I did it, and that was inauthentic to me. And that was I think that was the first time I made one of those types of decisions. That same year, I smoked some cigarettes. And then over the next few years, that progressed and progressed. And I'm sure we'll get into that later. But in general, I had an all-American childhood. I was a very happy kid, played a ton of sports. My family was very supportive and available and present. And I was just bound and determined to fuck it all up.
Wow. That's crazy, man. I don't know how much you know about me. I've shared kind of my story, and I didn't struggle with addiction of drugs. I just struggled with drugs and being in that scene, like myself taking them and then selling them. And so there was a period of like 2 or 3 years in high school where I was like living the fast life, if you will, and really got heavily involved in all of that. And I actually, I think about it now, and growing up, like I had family members that actually struggled with addiction. I lost my aunt to drug addiction. She actually, died in a homeless shelter that caught on fire.
Oh my God.
And so, I always knew growing up that like I had that like addictive personality, and I had to really be careful with it. Was that something like, did anybody else in your family, even extended, struggle with addiction at all, or anything like that? Or
Yeah, great question. On my mom's side, there are several people that have battled meth addiction or alcoholism.
Got it.
Yep. So I've definitely got some of that in my genes. And my mom herself is very type A. Now, I wouldn't call her compulsive, but she's very, she just does things very repetitively. And so I think I picked up a lot of that ism from her.
Yeah. It's interesting being a entrepreneur, like, and also, like, because of that addictive personality, it carries over into, entrepreneurship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, your business is your baby, essentially. I felt like ever since I like went all in on kind of starting iCoach and this business, like, it's very easy to create kind of that same addiction, that same kind of like obsession. And it's really easy to like get burnt out. Have you seen that kind of carry over as well with entrepreneurship?
In the beginning, yes, big time. And I think the biggest thing, I don't know if it was really attached to my addictive or compulsive tendencies. I think it was more just learning time management in a completely, like when you have complete autonomy of time and space. I think that, most people look at that and think that must be amazing and you must feel so free. And while you definitely get a sense of that, I'm sure you can relate to this. While you definitely get a sense of that, when you have no boundaries at all, it can actually be quite constraining. It can be really hard to know how to manage your time and how to actually be productive. And when I first started Brute, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I was waking up super late. I didn't know how to like divvy up projects and break them out into smaller pieces. And my energy was just all over the place. I was expending energy carelessly, and I struggled for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's something I'm definitely, getting better and better at. I think time blocking has really, really helped me, but even that in itself is a process. But yeah, man, I completely agree. I mean, I've been in it. I guess, how long have you been like a full entrepreneur? How many years has it been now?
4.5.
4.5. Yeah. So yeah, I've only been there for technically 1 year, but I can definitely relate to a lot of that. And I definitely think that, for me, it's just like trying to continue to remind myself that it's a journey, it's a process. Like I'll continue to get better and better as I go. So
certainly, man. Certainly.
So Louisiana, huh? My dad, we actually talked about this. I don't know if you remember, but he grew up in Baton Rouge. So I can definitely relate in a sense to just kind of hearing some of his stories growing up. He actually like used to like wrestle like alligators or whatever. I don't know if you did that, but
everyone in Louisiana wrestles alligators.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I've seen very few alligators in Louisiana in my life, surprisingly.
Really?
Much less wrestled them.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked to hear that when I was growing up as a kid. He told me that story.
Yeah.
But dude, so take me back a little bit. So you said that you kind of grew up, you played sports, like you were the oldest of, you said seven or eight?
No, I was the oldest. I was the oldest of three. I think you heard. I had 7 of my 8 great grandparents were still alive.
That's right. Okay. Got it. Okay, so I was the oldest of 4, so kind of similar in that sense. But what sports did you play like in kind of elementary school days and then middle school and high school?
Football, baseball, soccer, basketball, and golf. And then I got into powerlifting and weightlifting towards the end of high school before I left.
Got it. Okay. And did you, like in high school, like, or after high school, did you end up going and playing in college or playing any sports in college or going to college or?
I didn't. I tried out for the University of Utah baseball team and didn't make the cut. What I don't know if you want to go back to this, but I had taken 2 full years off when I went to rehab. I took 2 years off of playing any sports, of lifting, etc. And so when I got back into training for that tryout, I was very, very weak.
Got it. Okay, well, cool. So let's take it back then. Like I'm interested to dive into this story. So at 9 years old, you first got introduced to alcohol, and then later you said smoking cigarettes. So then that turned into what? Like what did the next few years look like for you?
Yeah, the next few years look like probably once every few months drinking a little bit of alcohol. I think I got drunk for the first time when I was 12, really drunk. And at 13, I discovered pot. And that's when everything started to change really quickly because I loved weed. And it went from something I would do just with friends on the weekends to very quickly something I was doing every night by myself. By the time I was 15, I was using a bunch of different pills. In the summer of 2006, I was using a ton of Xanax and painkillers, enough that it pretty much blacked out that entire summer. By the time I was 17, I was using meth and MDMA and Oxycontin. And I had a friend pass away that fall. This is 2007 or 2008. And instead of going to his funeral, I chose to shoot up opiates for the first time. And so that was a obvious sign that I was out of control. In the springtime of the next year, I stole a phone from a classmate and I got caught doing it. And so the school was going to expel me. And instead, my parents said, okay, if we send him to treatment, will you just not put that on his record? And so that's what they did. They sent me to treatment after that.
Wow, that's crazy. So, I mean, with your parents and like your family, I mean, did they know that any of this was going on? I mean, especially like maybe not, every few months when you're 12 years old or whatever, but like as you started getting older, or at what point did they kind of find out about all this?
When I was about 14, actually, I think I got caught at a Sadie Hawkins dance smoking weed. Or that was the first time I got caught. Then I got caught again, and they immediately started bringing me to AA meetings. That might have been a little preemptive, but they started bringing me to AA meetings, and my dad would just bring me over there. He would let me out the car. I would go in, and I remember intentionally like closing my ears without putting my hands over my ears. Like I knew that I might hear something in there that would make me want to change. And I didn't want that to happen. So I would intentionally like look down at the ground. I wouldn't say a word. And this happened dozens of times, and intentionally didn't want to hear anything that would make me want to change, because I felt like I was being controlled, and my parents didn't understand me, and blah, 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 blah. Over the years, they started to catch me more and more, and they started to drug test me. I learned how to pass the drug test with fake piss. And eventually they caught me because I was on a family vacation. I was blackout something. I was on a bunch of different drugs, and they gave me a drug test, and I still passed. And my dad pulled down my pants because he's like, there's no way that there's no way you're sober. So he pulled down my pants, and out falls this bottle of fake pee. And then the jig was up. So they started catching me when I was about 14, and they drug tested me as many times as every 3 days.
Wow. That is insane. That's crazy. Was the school that you were at, was this something that a lot of kids were doing? Was this like your environment, or like, did you really have to like try hard to get access to these drugs, or like, what did that look like?
Yeah, there were probably a dozen kids out of, I went to a super small school. So this is, again, 2-stoplight town. But there were probably only a half dozen to a dozen people that were using any sort of hard drugs. And like I said, when I was 9, I started looking up to these kids. And if I wasn't in the same environment, I don't know if I ever would have gone down this path. But a handful of kids in my school came from some really broken homes where their parents were using drugs or selling drugs. And so it really was never hard for me to get anything. I remember buying cocaine from one of my best friend's moms at one point. So I just happened to be surrounded by a handful of kids that were really into it.
Wow. That's crazy, man. I think back to kind of my story, and at my high school, like ecstasy was like the big thing. Like, of course there was like drinking and smoking weed and all that, but like ecstasy was really like the biggest thing. Like our junior year, we had like house parties all the time, and there were these like heroin based ecstasy pills, and we would just like literally just like have a house party, and like, I don't know, it was like the weirdest thing in the world. And then the next year it turned into like going to all the festivals and clubs, and, like it was just crazy. There was so many times that, I thought to myself, like, what am I doing? Like there was so many like crazy lows. I remember one time, it's kind of a disturbing story. I was like sitting on a countertop, and it was like raining outside, storming hard, thundering lightning. And I was just like staring at this knife, like this like huge like butcher knife, for like an hour. Like I was on ecstasy. And finally somebody like came up to me, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And like, hit me and like snapped me out of it, and like told me to like go outside. And I went outside, and then that just got even worse. I was like walking down the street, and I felt like there was like spirits and like all this stuff like flying by me. I was just like, I was obviously tripping really, really hard. I remember my friend came and picked me up that night, somebody that like did not do drugs at all. And me just like breaking down and like just crying and bawling for like hours and hours on end. And, it's just crazy. Like I've talked to a lot of people that, took drugs throughout their life at some point, and, some obviously are much crazier than others. But they can really, really damage your life, and like, you don't know what you're getting into at the beginning,
Yeah. Especially kids have no ability, at least I didn't, no ability to think long-term. Like how are my actions, and how are these behaviors and habits that I'm building, how are they going to impact me in 2, 4, 5 years? We have no ability to do that. So I was just living in the moment, trying to get out of my head as much as possible at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, man. I relate with a lot of it, honestly. Now that you say that in terms of looking up to those kids, like, I mean, I remember like watching like, Fast and the Furious and like playing like Grand Theft Auto and like literally like just living in this like, I don't know, like just thinking I was like invincible, and then like finally when I like finally got in trouble, like that's when I finally like woke up and realized that like, no, you're not invincible. Like you have one life, you have one opportunity, and like everything can be taken from you in an instant. So, well, dude, so your story up to this point is pretty crazy. So after this, once you finally you said rehab for 2 years, was that right?
Yep. Yeah. A year and a half and then a transition program out in Utah.
So how long did it take? You said when you were going to the AA classes, like you didn't want to change, you didn't want to hear anything, like you're shutting it off. Did you keep doing that when you started rehab or?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing I went to was a wilderness therapy program, and over there, I played ball for the most part. I knew that I had a problem. I knew that I was out of control, and I was very unhappy in high school. And so I was absolutely willing to take some time off, to be sent away, and to give it a shot. I thought that I was just going to be sent away for like 30 or 60 days. I was going to be cured. I was going to learn how to handle it better, my drug use. And I was going to come back and everything was just going to be almost like normal, but a little bit better. And while I was there, I was still a minor. And so my parents chose to send me to a much longer residential treatment center. When they sent me there, I was pissed. I did not sign up for a longer program, certainly not a year-long program where I couldn't leave the premises the whole time. So when I got there, I played along for about a month, and when people first get to a facility like that, there's this period where they're trying to figure you out. They don't push you too hard. And so for a while, it wasn't too difficult for me. And I just kind of went through the motions and pretended like I was doing quote unquote work. Once they got to know me and started to really push me and challenge me in therapy, I couldn't handle it. It was so painful. I went through like a 2 or 3 month period where I couldn't sleep a wink. All of a sudden, without the drugs, I had this anxiety that I had never felt before. I felt nervous talking to people, especially being around women. And then this anxiety would just keep me up all night. I was also extremely depressed. I was thinking about, I had this sob story about my childhood is done, my youth is done. Like I'm never going to get to experience high school like a normal kid. I probably won't get to experience college like a normal kid. And I took that really hard for a long time. And so much so that so I was turning 18 in like 4 months. And so I decided that I was just going to say fuck all of them, and I was going to leave when I turned 18. So I spent the next 4 months with my head in my hands, just completely withdrawn from all therapy, from all schoolwork. It was like a heroic example of withdrawing. And I fully intended to leave when I turned 18. So I talked to my parents about it a lot. I talked to my therapist. And when the day came, I had my bags packed. I had 2 huge black trash bags full of all my stuff. And my plan was to go down to the 7-Eleven that was kind of on the same block. I was going to steal 2 40-ounce beers so that I could make myself feel better. And then I was going to go to a pawn shop and pawn off like an iPad and a pair of sunglasses. And I was going to get a Greyhound bus ticket back to Louisiana. And I was going to go sell Oxycontin because I have a genetic back disorder. That was my grand plan. And so the day comes, I have my bags packed, and I'm obviously crying out for help because I spent 3 or 4 hours with my therapist, just talking to him, sobbing, crying. And I could have just left. So I wanted to be convinced to stay, and I just didn't just wasn't there yet. I was too scared to leave and didn't see the point in staying as well. And the final straw was that I called my mom, and I think I'll never forget this moment. I hope I never will. She answered the phone and was just immediately sobbing because she knew what the call was about. And she said, "I feel like my son is dying to me today." And long story short, I ended up not being able to do that to her. And so I decided to stay. And for the first little bit, I stuck around and committed to the program for my parents. And it wasn't for another month or so where I really saw, okay, if I really lean into this therapy thing, I noticed that I can be accepted for who I am. And life is worth it, right? Life is worth it sober. And so that was the beginning of me kind of taking responsibility and accountability for my own actions and my own future.
Wow. That's amazing, man. First off, I mean, thanks for, being so vulnerable and transparent and like sharing your story. Like, I know obviously you've gone through the process of being able to share it, before this, but, I know it probably took some time to be able to share it. I didn't share my story for like 8 years. And when I finally did, it actually just kind of surprised me that so many people, just kind of like reached out to me, and, like there was some people that had struggled with certain things throughout my story and kind of resonated with them. And so, yeah, man, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story like that. Like, I know there's so many different levels to it, and I'm sure we could probably go into depth on so many different levels, but, knowing where you are today, like I remember walking out of jail. I was literally in jail for 24 hours, but that was enough to wake me up. And I remember when I finally got out, I walked out to my parents, and they're both just staring there, crying, bawling, and it was the worst feeling in the world, and, I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I was the oldest of 4 brothers and sisters. So obviously facing them and then facing like my whole community, like I just told myself, I was like, you know what, I got this second chance. Like, I'm not ever going to let these people down again.
That's awesome, man. And did you ever?
No, not so far.
Not like that, at least, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. It did its job then.
Yeah, no, I mean, I tell people all the time, like I got woke up at 18 years old. Like that was the moment that changed my life. That was the moment that made me realize that, everything I was doing at that time was hurting people, and I needed to literally dedicate the rest of my life to helping other people. And that's what it's been for the last 10 years. So
that's amazing, man. Awesome.
So after you kind of have this turning point, this mindset shift, if you will, what kind of happened from there? So I know you, like, when did you get into CrossFit around this time, or what did that look like?
Yes. So I fully lean into the therapeutic process. It completely changes my life, and I was able to just really develop some amazing coping skills and an ability to kind of handle myself as an adult as I'm about to go into college. I learned how to do that, got out, and I immediately start at the University of Utah, and I start training for a marathon. This is December, or let's say January of 2008, I think it is. I have a hard time with years. Anyway, 2008, I started training for the marathon, and really that's my biggest focus. I could care less about school, and I trained my ass off. I probably ran every single day. I had this wood chip track right across from my house, like literally a 10-second walk from my house. So I was running on there every day. I trained super hard for it, and I end up winning my age division in the Salt Lake City Marathon. Super pumped on that, but very burnt out on running. And within 3 weeks, like all of a sudden, I didn't have this goal that I was striving towards. And I got really depressed, like super quickly. The halfway house that I was in, like the transition house I was in, most of the kids were using either alcohol or as bad as some of the kids were smoking crack or meth. And so I didn't want to be around any of them. So I had kind of isolated myself. I was depressed. And the final straw was my AA sponsor at the time. He hands me, or not hands me, he's smoking these cigarettes that he rolled up. And up to that point, I hadn't smoked since I left for rehab. And then I had gotten out and I was running. So there was, obviously I'm not going to smoke, but not having I wasn't running anymore and not having any goal that I'm striving towards, I asked him for a cigarette. And so he rolls me this cigarette, no filter. And so if you or anyone listening has ever smoked, you know that these are like super, super harsh in comparison. And it really messed my throat up. So much so that I was sick for about a week. Like I had a really bad cough. My throat was keeping me up at night. And it got to the point where I felt like I needed some kind of medicine. Like it was really ruining my life for that week. And when I had the thought of needing cough medicine, something switched in my mind, because a lot of cough medicine is, it's a narcotic, right? It has either morphine or codeine in it. And that was the first time I had ever even considered, since I had made that commitment in rehab, it's the first time I had ever considered wanting to use. And so this seed of a thought popped up in my head. And I remember talking to my AA sponsor about it later that night and feeling like very resolute about it. Like I'm not going to take action. I'm going to stay sober. I talked to a couple other friends in AA about it, and I wasn't going to do it. And then the next day, that seed had grown to like an absolute necessity. I felt like I had to do it. I was going to do it. And I decided that I was going to go to the university hospital. And not only was I going to get some cough syrup, but I was also going to lie to them about back pain, because I have a genetic disorder and I knew I could get some painkillers out of it. And so I didn't tell anyone about that. I just go to the hospital. I lie to the doctor. I get 2 prescriptions in the hospital. And as I'm getting, I get in the elevator with the medicine. And by the time I've reached the bottom, I've already taken a handful of pills and washed it down with cough syrup. And later that night, I'm smoking crack and heroin. And the next week would be the worst of my drug use in my entire life. I went back with, everything and more. I was shooting up heroin, which I had never done. I had only shot up Oxycontin before. And so it was worse, and it was more than ever before. And at the end of that week, some people in my halfway house turned me into the treatment facility. And so they called me and they asked me to go in for a drug test. And luckily I was not far gone enough to refuse them and like run away or anything. I decided that I was going to get sober again. And that was the last time that I used, that was the last time I used those drugs. Since then I smoke weed and drink occasionally. But that was the last time I used those hard drugs.
Wow. It's so crazy that something so I love the example, right? Like a seed, and what that kind of grew into. Like, it's just crazy that, a thought and what a thought turned into, that thought turned into a whole week of like self-destruction. Mm-hmm. And maybe, I don't know if you've thought about this, or maybe if you know, but I feel like a lot of the times when I have conversations with people about drug use, like a lot of the times the topic comes up, like I was suppressing something. Mm-hmm. Was it that for you at all? Or was it only like it all stemmed back from just the fact that you were trying to be like those kids? You were trying to be cool like those kids? Or was there anything you were trying to suppress?
Great question, man. It started out as a way to fit in. And by the time I was 15, I was fully physically and psychologically addicted, without a doubt. Um, I was, I didn't realize this until rehab, but I was a very anxious kid, and I still battle with, some social anxiety and just anxiety in general. I was depressed. And once I started going to those AA meetings way back in the day, I started to really feel like I didn't fit in anywhere. Like I felt like my experience going through high school was all of a sudden so different from everyone else. So I didn't feel like, even though I was a popular kid, I always felt like everyone else had a different kind of relationship than they had with me. So one that was deeper, one that was where they spent more time together, because I was splitting my time between AA, sports, drug friends, family. And I told myself a story of, I don't fit in here. And once I was out of rehab, I big time still had that story going on. I didn't fit in with the people in my treatment facility. I felt like I didn't fit in with anyone in college because I was sober. And so I isolated myself, and I was just trying to numb my pain, man. I didn't know what to do in life. I felt lonely. And so I was just trying to run from that pain. And I think nowadays, I know, I love this new model of addiction and recovery that's going on, this new movement, where the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And at the time, I just felt like I had no connection. And since that day, my biggest priority in life is to be as connected as possible to both myself and to others. And those relationships, again, including the relationship I have with myself, are solely responsible for all of the success and happiness that I have in my life.
I love that, man. That's so powerful. That's, man, I just reflect back like through my life, and then I kind of think about your story here, and a lot, for so many people, it's overcoming adversities, right? Like everything that we've gone through up until this point has kind of shaped us into who we are today. So I want to learn, kind of as we kind of come to a close here. Obviously your story is, incredibly inspiring. You've been through so much and had to overcome, so many of your own demons. And then now today, kind of, knowing what you do, kind of share with the listeners, what are you currently doing today? And I guess, how did the process from, maybe you could start with when you started competing in CrossFit, and then kind of where you're at now as we kind of finish up here.
Yeah, man. So shortly after that, I think your question before this was like, how did I get into CrossFit? And that's why I shared the relapse story. Shortly after I relapsed and then got sober again, I found CrossFit. So this is December 2009. I found CrossFit, and I thought I was in great shape because I had run the marathon earlier that year and I had done so well. And I remember getting just about last place every single class. And where usually losing would be really defeating to me, that's the relationship I had with failure at the time. It defeated me. Usually that would happen. For whatever reason, this CrossFit thing, as long as I could like beat one person, then I felt like I was moving somewhere. And so it really kept my monkey mind busy. And like so many others, I became really obsessed with it really quickly. I didn't learn about the CrossFit Games for like a full year. I would show up at the gym. I would see who had the fastest time on the board, and I would just try to beat that. And for 6 months, I was nowhere even close. Again, I would get nearly last place. But I was just trying to beat whoever was in the class, as well as whoever was on the board. In 2010, I competed against Tommy Hackenbrook, who, now he's an OG, and a lot of listeners might not know him, but he's for sure one of the best of all time. I competed against him, at a local throwdown that he used to put on called Ute CrossFit Throwdown or something like that. And for most of the day, I was beating him. And this is obviously by this time I had improved it a ton, and I was beating everybody at my gym. And so I'm competing against him. I'm beating him for the most of the day. And then we start doing some strength events, which were by far my biggest weakness. And he ends up really destroying me in the event. But I had done well enough to kind of catch his eye at that event. And so he invited me and my friend to join his gym to start a team. And so we did that. And the first year we went to the games and we placed 11th. And then the next year we decided that we were going to take some of the best members of that team and also have Tommy jump on board and then try to recruit some people from other gyms to make a team that was as competitive as possible. And so we ended up doing that. We would go on to win the CrossFit Games for the next 2 years. After that, I became a strength and conditioning coach for universities. I coached at Southern Utah University as well as LSU. And that's around the time I think that's around the time you met me. I can't remember what year it was. But as I was coaching at LSU, I had a back surgery as well. So I've mentioned the genetic disorder that I've had a couple times on the show so far. But CrossFit had finally pushed it over the edge, and I was in a place where I couldn't feel below my knees when I would wake up. I just had lost all feeling from this compression in my low back, just pinching different nerves. And so I had a lumbar fusion done. And in 2014, I decided that strength and conditioning was no longer for me and that I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something for myself. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to have the autonomy to have the sort of impact that I wanted to have on people. And so I started Brute Strength, which some of you may know, as well as I had the intention to buy a gym from Tommy back in Salt Lake City. Within about 6 months, I decided that, and going into that, the only reason I started Brute in the first place was kind of I was kind of doing a favor to this guy named Matt Bruce, who had got me the job at LSU. He was really into it. He had gotten me the job, and he wanted to do like an online programming company. And I thought it was kind of gimmicky. I didn't think anybody would be interested in it, but I just did it as kind of a favor to him in the beginning. But my real interest was in being a gym owner. I thought that was just going to be my jam. I was going to love it. But within 6 months, I figured out I wanted nothing to do with the gym, and I wanted to go full on into this, this online business called Brute Strength that we had. And that's what we did. So January 2015, I went full time into Brute, and we're still crushing it today. Along the way, but let's see, 5 months later, I met Adee, and I know I'm just cruising through a bunch here, but you asked me to summarize 7 or 8 years, so I'm trying my best. I met Adee in 2015, and come to find out that we had both started our companies. Hers is Working Against Gravity. We had started our companies in the same month of the same year, and we didn't know each other yet. And so we met in May later that year and fell in love, moved in together really quickly. And for the next few years, we just grew our companies side by side. We would help each other with leadership. We would help each other with marketing, you name it. We were trying to help each other grow each other's companies. And sometime in the spring last year, we decided to combine forces. And we did this for several reasons. One, we want to start a family in the next few years. And we looked at our lives as of last year, and we noticed that, or we knew that we couldn't be the type of parents that we want to be if we're both running separate companies. We knew the amount of hours that we were working. We knew the level of responsibility and time commitment that it really takes. And we just knew we weren't going to be able to be fully present and available in the way that we want to be whenever kids come into our lives. And so we decided to combine forces. And so Matt Bruce took over as CEO of Brute last year, and I joined Adee full time at WAG.
Wow. Dude, that's awesome, man. I could probably sit here and talk to you all day long, but I know you're a busy man, so I want to respect your time. But dude, props to you, man. Your story is incredibly inspiring, seeing everything that you've gone through and where you are today. Me just knowing you over the last 5 years, like it's me looking, I guess, from the outside and knowing minimal details, it's just been inspiring to see. So, dude, I just want to commend you on everything thus far. And I'm excited to see what you have in store for the future. Anything you want to share in terms of big things coming in 2019?
In 2019, there are two things that we're really pumped about right now that are really just getting off of the ground. So for the first 4 years that we existed, all we did was one-on-one coaching. Now we're starting to coach coaches as well as gyms. So if you are someone that wants to become a nutrition coach, or you just want to learn about nutrition coaching or learn about nutrition in more depth, we now offer the same exact coach training certification that all of our coaches go through. It's a 5-phase course, and it goes from everything from fundamentals and principles of nutrition to setting and changing macronutrient profiles to sample check-ins and advanced sample check-ins. And the best part about this is it's kind of like a digital mentorship. It's not like a lot of online courses out there where you just fill in multiple choice answers and a robot, says if you pass or fail. You will get feedback and support from an actual live human being, one of our head coaches. And it's an incredibly in-depth course, and one that will leave you with the ability to make a huge impact on people's lives. So the people that are signing up for this program, a lot of them are former members that just want to be able to do with others what was done with them, right? They want to be able to have that same level of impact with other people. So if it sounds like that resonates with anyone listening, you can contact us at info@workingagainstgravity.com, and we'll throw you on the wait list. Also, we're starting to coach gyms. So if you're an affiliate owner or you go to an affiliate that might be interested, what we do is we license out everything that we do to gyms in order to give you all of the tools necessary to start your own nutrition business within your gym. So we coach one of your coaches, we give you our technology, we give you marketing and sales, as well as business support. And we have just over 60 gyms signed up in our first couple launches. And people have anywhere from 5 to 55 of their own clients that they're now coaching in nutrition. So they're starting to see a real impact in their gym. And so we're stoked about that. And you can also contact us for that at affiliate@workingagainstgravity.com.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, that sounds legit. Those of you that are listening now, go check it out. And Michael, thank you so much for taking the time, my man. I really appreciate it.
Justin, thank you so much for having me on, brother. It's great to see you, man.
Great seeing you. Take care, brother.